Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm going to show you a method that James Roadman and I, to a lesser extent, came up with making bridge pins for my guitars. And I shouldn't just say my guitars, just guitars in general. These are based on the Waverly bridge pins. They have a 5-degree taper. But the reason for this is really twofold. One is that on some of my guitars, I thought it would be a nice accent if I could do custom bridge pins, something that would match maybe the back and side wood of the guitar, or a fretboard inlay that I could put a dot, on top of the bridge pin. So the bridge pins tie it into the guitar themselves. And then the other reason is that, I probably, like most of you, I have accumulated just boxes and boxes of scrap wood, and it'd be nice to find a use for it. These are, sometimes very precious materials that we're using, and in a way to get full utility out of the materials. So an example of that would be, this is a cutout of a bridge, Brazilian rosewood, and I can probably use these pieces right here to make a full set of Brazilian rosewood bridge pins. So I'm getting more use out of the wood. And then the final, pardon me, final reason is just that there's not too many people who will make you a set of custom bridge pins. There are a few, but anytime you have to outsource something, then you can be dependent on somebody else's time schedule. So I'm happy to be doing this for my guitars now, and happy to show you the method that we've come up with. So, James, do you have anything to add?
No, that sounds good. Do you want to get into it and then we'll go over the parts, or?
Yeah, I think I'll just have you describe the parts you made as I come to them in the
Okay.
process.
Okay.
So, all right. So, first step is um, I cut up a large board of Bolivian rosewood or palo ferro, whatever you want to call it, and I basically made these long rectangles, and these are about 420 by 420 of an inch. Um, and I could probably go a little smaller. I'm still trying to figure out what the absolute minimum size I can make a full set of bridge pins is with. But right now, this is pretty comfortable. And then once I mill this stock, then before I put it in the lathe, I nip off 2 corners, as you can see right here. I think these are at about 30 degrees. And what this is going to allow me to do is to mount this easier in the 3-jaw chuck in the lathe.
Michael,
So,
Michael,
yeah.
can I
Uh-huh.
ask how you nip that off? Is that a table saw operation?
Yes, table saw,
Okay.
exactly. So, and then the length, and then so I've got this material made up, and then I cut this into shorter segments, and I can get three. Right now, I can get 3 pins out of about 3 3/4 inches. So I'd cut 2 of these segments at about 3 3/4 inches, and then this mounts into the lathe. And I guess we're ready to get that part started here. Okay, so this is not a any kind of particularly fancy lathe. It's a Sureline lathe, but you would need a decent quality lathe to do this with pretty tight tolerances, especially for putting the dot in the top. It has to be very concentric. So first thing I'm going to do is mount this guy in here in this 3-jaw chuck. And now you can see why I put the 2 little angles on there. Um, when I had just a square and was trying to mount this up, it was just incredibly cumbersome. And while I could get it to seat and turn it round, I was losing a lot more material. Then I'm going to tighten the chuck. one of the cute things about lathes is these are known as Tommy bars. So Tommy, wherever you are, I have your bars. All right, so then this little piece right here is called the tailstock. And in the tailstock, I've put in this piece. It's called a dead center. And this has I think it's a 0 Morse taper. I could be wrong on that. James, do you remember?
Yeah, that's right. 0 in the tailstock and a 1 in the
Okay.
headstock.
So this comes in handy for if I'm turning a longer piece like this to stabilize this end. So what I'm going to do is move the tailstock a little bit closer. And take this almost all the way out. And then I'm going to lock down the tailstock. And I'm going to advance this to give myself a little center punch. I'm going to back it off. And then, unless you want to hear a really annoying screaming noise, I'm going to put a little wax right there. The reason this is called a dead center is because it does not move with the piece. So this will be rotating at a high RPM, and there's a lot of friction right there. So putting a little wax there smooths things out. And now I'm going to move the blade here to start cutting. And we're just going to turn this down into a cylinder. Okay. So Ian, I'm going to turn on the vacuum now, so hopefully it won't be too loud.
Michael, can you just say a couple more things just so we hear? Can you hear us? James, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Do you have anything to annotate there? Any sage words of wisdom about how close do you want to get your eyeballs to this when you're doing it?
Keep your eyeballs back.
Back, you say, okay.
Yes, away.
Okay. It looks like he's getting his fingers in there too. Is that recommended?
Not recommended. At least not until you get very comfortable with with how it works.
For guys like you and me with like incredibly long ponytails, like is there any?
Yeah, don't do it.
Okay, keep your ponytail out of it.
Yeah, so he's you going in a little bit at a time. If you try and do too much, you run the risk of it kind of shattering if it catches the grain. You can. There are other methods of chucking as well. He mentioned that he takes a couple of the corners off so that it'll fit in a 3-jaw chuck. You can also get a 4-jaw chuck. Shoreline makes a 4-jaw keyed chuck, so you could go that route, but they're relatively expensive. I think this is a better option.
Cool. How close do you want to get your tool to the chuck when it's spinning like that? Like, is that about as close as you'd go?
You just don't want to touch it.
Okay.
But it's not catastrophic. You'll usually realize it very quickly and back away.
Okay.
All right, so I've turned this down. And what I can do now is flip it in the lathe and then turn down this part, which is in the chuck, to match this part of the cylinder.
Somebody playing guitar. Who's playing guitar?
So you can see what I'm going to do now is just even this cylinder out. So
What's a shoreline set you back these days, Michael? Do you know?
Um, this one was used, and so I don't know what they are new. I would say, I don't know, James, it probably one run like what, like 800, maybe $500.
Yeah, about looks like about 800.
Okay.
Is there any kind of like it feels like you could crush that wood with the with the chuck? Are you is there like a preferred tautness or do you just like give it hell?
At this stage, I can tighten it down quite a bit
Okay.
because I'm going to do a lot more milling. So even if I put some marks in the wood, I'm not worried about it.
Okay.
And the jaws here, the points are not sharp; they're kind of rounded over. So it's not putting any deep gouges in the wood.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm still going to use the dead center on this and put a little more wax on there.
Is it okay to ask questions while we're going here?
Do it.
Yeah, please.
Is the only difference between a dead center and a live center is that the live one spins?
That's my understanding.
Okay. I always wondered what a live center was when they said like, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Sure. All right, so I'm just going to make this part look like this part right here. So I'm going to turn the vacuum back on.
James, is there anything special about that cutter, do you think?
It's got a very sharp point compared to most, metal. There's not much of a nose radius. You just want something that's very sharp.
What's a nose radius?
There'll a lot of times on when you're using metal bits, there'll be a bit of a curve in the front. You can see how that one comes to a very sharp point.
Mm-hmm.
I just found that that works better when doing wood.
Yeah, we need to 3D print a vacuum holder for the end of his the end of his table there. That's like T-slot, isn't it?
Yep, it's a good idea.
All right, so to this point, we've just made a round cylinder. And you can't see it, but over here at the end of the lathe, there's another little hand wheel, and that advances the carriage back and forth. So I feel like I'm furiously driving a very small car, rotating this thing.
Short
All right.
little Aston Martin.
Yeah. So there we go. I have a very small lip here. It's not going to be an issue moving forward, but at this point, I really just want to get to round as quickly as possible. So the next thing I'm going to do is now make some marks on this stock. I made a little V block just on my table saw, and I put the round stock in here, and I just take a pull saw, and I'm just gonna come right through. I could either cut off individual pins at this point, but I found it a little bit faster to just mark the end of the pin and the start of the next pin is the same. So I have to clamp this down, and I really don't have a good way to show you without moving the cameras around, but you get the idea. Just put this in the block and make a couple curves. And that's what gives me the marks right here. Any questions about that?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
I don't, but maybe
All
somebody else.
right. So here. Okay, so now I need to uh, do some work with some of the custom tooling that James made. And I'm going to start by, let me move this up a little bit if we can. I'm going to take out this cutter. And I'm going to put in this gauge block. I don't know, is that what you would call it, James?
Yeah, it's just a rectangular block that's ground very precisely.
Okay. And then I'm going to tighten this down. And I'm just going to move this out of the way for now. All right. And then the next piece of tooling that James made is this custom taper pin, and this is really key. Let me just go through the setup real quick, and then James, you could go over about how you made this.
Okay.
Yeah. So what this is going to do is it is going to set my tool holder exactly parallel to this pin right here. Now I'm going to lock this down. I'm going to back this off. And now I'm going to switch sides. And this end has a 5-degree taper on it. Okay. So now I'm going to tilt the whole head, this whole piece right here, and I'm going to tilt it so that this angle matches up with this gauge block. So I got to loosen the head. I probably won't be able to see this on camera.
So the Sureline lathe is kind of unique in that to do tapers, rather than having a way that you can adjust to move the taper, you actually tilt the head. So normally there's a key in there that keeps it perpendicular. If you take that key out, then you can shift the head at whatever angle you'd like.
This is the key that locks it perpendicular. Sureline does make an accessory for so you can cut tapers. I think it mounts to the cross slide, but this works really well. So you can see how I can move this at an angle, and
I'm confused about how a normal lathe would work. Do all lathes tilt heads, James, or?
Normally they would have, well, some of them have a compound slide. So stacked on top of the regular slide, there would be an adjustable slide that can be moved into an angle. And normally the head stays perpendicular to the bed.
okay, so I have tilted this head now, and you can see that this taper pin is lined up with this gauge block. So now the head is tilted at 5 degrees exactly. All right, I'll get set up for the next cut. James, do you want to talk about making the taper pin?
Yeah, actually, I made some slides to show how one would set up these angles on a lathe to make taper pins
Yeah.
like that.
Let's
So a lot of the accessories that I made for this process involved really, really tight tolerances, right? You want that 5 degree angle on the pin to be very accurate. And then later on, you'll see there's a special collet I made to hold the pin after the taper's been made. You know, most lathes, like on the headstock of the Shoreline or on the compound rest, will be marked out in degrees, but it's not fine enough to be really accurate. So I thought I'd go over the use of what's called a sign bar to create angles, and so for creating this pin and for creating the collet, which you'll see later, there'll be the Morse taper that goes into the headstock, and then there's a 5 degree taper in the hole to hold the pin. And so when setting these angles, there's a risk of giving everybody some math anxiety here, but you use something called a sign bar, okay? And with this, by stacking pieces under it, you're able to develop whatever angle you're trying to achieve. So for instance, the headstock angle for the number one Morse taper is 1.4287 degrees. That's a level of accuracy that's just not really possible to do by eye. So I'm going to share my screen here. And all right. And so this is an example of how you would set those angles. And this will make a little more sense in a few slides when I show it on the lathe. But basically by stacking their G, the gauge blocks, by stacking the blocks there, you can achieve whatever angle you're trying to get to. Luckily, with the internet, we don't actually have to do the math anymore. This is an example of a sign bar calculator. And you can see here we have a sign bar with a distance of 5 inches between the rolls. We have our angle in there in degrees, minutes, and seconds. And that tells us that we need a certain height of block. And in this case, it's 0.1247. And so here's an example of setting it up. You asked about how you do the taper on lathes. And here you can see, rather than moving the headstock, there's a compound slide that can be set at an angle here. And so this is an example of setting the angle of that compound slide using the sign block.
So wait, do you just move that back and forth and do little adjustments until it's on the money, or?
Yes.
Oof.
And
right.
so it's a time-consuming endeavor, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to make the taper pin, because it reduces the time to set up that taper.
Mm-hmm.
Here you can see some examples, setting up the taper and turning the taper with that method. There's another example of the way you use the sign block and you would test the taper. So that's a taper, and I want to know, I have an idea of what that taper is, but I'm checking it with a sign block and a gauge there to make sure it agrees with what I think it is. And you'll see this later on, but this is the method that I use to make the collet that you'll see shortly. And I can come back to that. But basically using the sign bar and setting the lathe, I was able to create the tapers that you'll see on the collet and then split the collet. But we can come back to that when Michael gets to that point.
Okay.
Sure, let's come back to that.
Gee willikers, that looks complicated.
All right, I think ready for the next step.
Yes,
Ian,
sir.
do you want to
Yep.
get the lathe on camera here? Okay. So
Mike, can you center up the camera, or is it going to get in your way if you do that?
no, I think I can do it. Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I took the stock we just made. I put some saw curves in there to mark the end of the pin, the start of the head, and the top of the head. And now that we've tilted the head 5 degrees, we're going to turn the 5 degree taper onto this part of the shaft right here. So I'll see if I can. I'm just going to turn the vacuum on.
Do you think, James, would you like to narrate any of this?
uh, not a whole lot to say. He'll slowly turn down the taper and test to see when the large end matches where he wants the head of the pin to start.
Okay. How accurate? So he's going to want to go in a certain distance to produce the diameter that he's looking for at the top and the bottom of the pin, correct?
Yes.
How
Yes.
accurate are your measurements, are the delineations on the wheels for your inner innie and outie movements?
So what I did was make a little test. He'll probably pull it out here in a minute. A little test block. I used a bridge pin reamer and a known pin to make a little test block. And pretty shortly he'll probably insert it, and keep removing material until it just fits into that block.
Okay. So a lot like you might do fitting a fitting a bridge
Yeah.
pin anyway.
The reverse of fitting the bridge pin.
Or using a violin taper gauge
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
All right. So I've got a 5 degree taper right now, but I'm not at the diameter that I want. And I have just a little bit farther to go here to get to the underside or of the head or the top of this shoulder or the bottom of this shoulder right here. And one of the challenges I found with using this method, pardon me, is that it's fairly easy to make a pin. It's harder to make 6 pins exactly the same and be consistent because I could always cut a little farther, I could cut a little shallower, and if I want the length to be the same of each pin, then this is a mark I really have to pay attention to. So I want the length and the diameter at the end of the cut to be the same on each pin. So at this point, I've just roughed it out, but now I'm gonna kind of sneak up on it, break out the calipers, make sure I'm at the target diameter here, and I've just gotten into that saw curve right there. So, and the target diameter is 0.22 inches, and right now we're at 2.75. So we got a little ways to go.
James, if a person was going into business making bridge pins, would you have is there the ability to make stops on the machines or something to where you can do some repeatability, or is there just too many variables in a
I mean, a lot of it depends on the length that it's sticking out from the headstock, how far you have to go to get to the large end of the taper. So if you could control for all those things, I think you could. But a little bit makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
In the same way when you're reaming out the bridge pin holes.
Yeah. This seems like something I need my optivisors for.
I need them for everything.
Okay, so right now I'm 10 thou over, and this hand wheel does have graduations on it. As you can see, each one represents a thousandth of an inch. So 1,000ths here would mean a 2 thou reduction on the diameter. So if I want to go 10 thou, I would move this 5. And just check it again. And we're at but about 1.5 thou over.
Mhm.
So I'm just going to give it a little.
Do you think that's high-speed steel tooling he's using?
Yeah, the bit is high speed steel. Yeah.
Okay, just one more check. All right, we're right at 220. I also had a little block which I reamed out with a 5-degree reamer, where the top was 220 and I could just slide it on there. But it, in full disclosure, the last time I was using it, it got sucked up into the vacuum, and I've yet to fish it out. So, but the calipers works really well. So, okay. So we've cut the taper. Now, before I move on to the next step, I'm going to give this a little bit of a sanding. I'm using this maroon Scotch Brite.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You might want to put that on a long stick, Michael. I'm
What was
just
that,
kidding.
Ian?
I was just saying maybe put it on a long stick. You're getting your fingers real close there.
Oh,
You do
all
you
right.
though. I'm sorry.
Noted.
I don't mean to like safety shame you.
That's all right.
Do they make
It's gonna
safety
get.
glasses for fingers? Can you get
It's gonna.
like little safety glasses to put on your fingers?
All right. It's gonna get worse. So I put a little paste wax on a towel, and now I'm gonna apply this to this part of the pin.
Look at this. How exciting is that? That looks
All right. So that's we've now machined the shaft of the pin right here, and now we're going to work on the head. If I was be making a set of 6, remember I've got the rest of this cylinder in the lathe, so I would just cut this off, pull this out, do the next one, cut it off, do the next one, and essentially you end up with pieces like this.
Mhm.
But I'm just going to make one pin here. And so I'll put a little protection right there. And I'm going to use this kerf.
Mhm. Did you ever try it to just apply the saw to it while the machine was running? Did you ever try that?
Of course. And there's a reason that I haven't tried it again. So
Yeah,
let's just leave it at that.
let's leave it at that. All right.
Yeah. All right. So again, if I was doing a full set of pins, I would just advance this out, lock it down, and then repeat
Yeah.
that 6 times.
Uh-huh.
So, and you know, you do kind of get into a rhythm, or I get into a rhythm with it. I don't know if you would, Ian, but I do.
This looks like, like if I wasn't, you know, I think I could enjoy this activity.
It is very enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So
Do
now,
your customers have any idea what you go through to produce fancy bridge pins for them, or
no,
they
they
just
don't.
say, thanks,
They don't.
thanks, Michael?
Um, I was trying to remember there was some story a couple summers ago, or I feel like it was in the New York Times about the guy who he decided to do more of his own gardening to get his food. And
Hmm.
so he grew tomatoes, and then he kept track of all the costs, and it ended up being like a $30 tomato.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about these bridge pins, but that's not the
Uh,
point. You
oh,
know,
it's not the point. Okay.
no, 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 no. This is not a money maker. This is more of
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
I think a nice custom touch to a
Hmm.
guitar. And there's one other reason, to do this potentially if you, for whatever reason, had a guitar that had an unusual bridge pin and one was missing, you could replicate it
Yeah.
if you needed to replace a part. Or if it was a very old guitar and say maybe had, I don't know, ivory bridge pins or something, and you
Hmm.
needed to make a period correct replacement, you could do it. So,
Hmm.
okay.
By the way,
So,
kids, if you're ever wondering what the word bespoke means, this is bespoke right here.
so I've taken this chuck off, and um, this was about, I think it was about $140 or something for this chuck. So I'm not sure. I don't think this is included in the price for the lathe, but once you start to get into the accessories, it can get a little more spendy. So what I'm going to do is um, put this key back in the head and turn this head back uh, so that it's perpendicular to the cutter. I saw a question in the chat,
Yeah, let's see
which
what
was
that is. I'll go
okay.
ahead. Can this method be used with pretty much any material? I mean, if
Yeah, I
using
mean this
butter or
lathe is meant to
something.
cut metal, so you could make metal pins. Um, I haven't tried bone. I've only cut wood, but I would think that you could pretty much do any kind of plastic, bone, wood, metal on here. You have any thoughts about that, James?
Yeah, they're capable of cutting mild steel, um, brass, aluminum, etc. Um, it's a small lathe, so you want to take smaller, lighter cuts, but it's really a very capable lathe.
Okay.
Dan Earlywine, are you there? I better call him. Tell him he's missing out.
Okay, I got that the pin back in. The head is now aligned, and this is the next piece of tooling. Um, James, do you want to talk about all this while I get the next setup going here?
Yeah, sure. Um, I mean, the basic. So the principles that I showed before for setting up the lathe to do angles is really all that's required to make a collet. The important thing about collets is that they're very, very precise. You want the external taper and the internal taper to be as close to perfect as you can do it. Um,
I guess I don't understand how you cut the inside part of that. Did you use a taper drill bit?
you would use a boring bar.
Okay.
So so imagine the tool that he's using there to turn the external shape, turning that perpendicular and making it round so that it won't run into the sides of the hole. But if you run that at a taper straight in from the front, you can create a tapered angle.
Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah, you got a picture of that?
Yeah. Let me see if I have a picture of it or not. Can I share my screen while he's?
Yep. I think so.
And,
I'll remove the spotlight there. There you go.
okay. Well, so here I have. This is not that exact collet, but this is one that I made in the past. I don't have a picture of actually boring, but so what you would do is drill that internal hole out to the minor diameter or smaller than you want to be. You would set the compound slide at the angle that you need, and then you would run a bit in from the front in the same way that you would remove material from the exterior, but it would be internal material. And you just want those to be as accurate as possible. One thing that really helps is to try and do both of those in one setup. So you turn the external taper and then turn the internal taper without removing it from the lathe, so that you don't accidentally move the concentricity of it.
Okay.
And so this is an example of what I did after I turned the two tapers. I'll come back and split it so that there's a little bit of movement. When that collet is drawn into the headstock, it will pinch from all three sides evenly.
Cool. Michael,
right.
switch back to the machine.
Yeah, sure.
So there's
So this is the
collet.
collet that James made, and if it's not clear, you know, the internal taper of this collet is meant to match this pin that we just cut, and then this has female threads here, and then there's a bar that you insert from the other end. It hooks onto those threads, and then as you tighten the bar, the collet closes around the pin that we've just cut.
James, how far outside of the known shoreline stuff is this? Are there people on shoreline forums talking about stuff like this, or did you just figure this out from thin air?
Yeah, no, I didn't really look to see, but Shoreline sells, regular collets, just cylindrical collets. So I just took that idea, knowing that it needed to hold a 5-degree taper.
Uh-huh.
So Ian, earlier you asked about clamping on the wood and would it mar the face. So now we have one finished surface, but this collet is really pretty smooth on the inside. It matches the taper. So when I tighten it down, I found that it doesn't mark up the shaft of the tapered part of the pin at all. So, okay, so now we're going to get to turning the head. And the next piece that James made was this custom cutter. And, it's not anything too radical in the design. I wanted something that, basically approximated a Waverly pin. And so it does have a collar, and then the main portion here. We might have changed this curve a little bit, but this is what this cutter looks like. Do you have anything to add about the cutter, James, or how you ground this?
Well, I mocked it up in CNC in Fusion and did it on the CNC so that I could make small changes to it as we went along. I was able to mill the majority of the shape and then go back with a file and kind of relieve the edges so that as it cuts, it's not rubbing against the lower face. That's just oil hardening steel. It's pretty easy to do at home. Heat it up with a torch, and throw it in oil to harden it once you've shaped it. That's something that could easily be done just with needle files and a grinder.
So you could make your own custom cutter by yourself just by sticking your tongue out and trying really hard.
Sure.
Would you consider that shape to be a Roadman OG?
I was trying to make it match known bridge pins as much as I could.
Okay.
It's yeah, shaping the little collar is fairly difficult. It's very small.
It does. Michael, is there attrition involved in this? Like, do those little collars come off frequently and leave you frustrated? And
So far, no.
okay,
Yeah, it's been working good. So I've got this mounted in the cross slide, and what I'm going to do is just start to cut it. I'm not going to cut it all the way because I want to bore out the top to put some decorative plugs in there, and I just want to know that that I've got this width length of the head about right. So this is a little bit of a eyeballs, stick your tongue out, and I'm lining up the bottom of the collar with the bottom of this head that I've cut here.
we got a couple more. Actually, I'll wait till afterwards to ask the questions because this is kind of the shot of the operation here. Here we go. It's going in, people, and while Michael's got the noise going. Oh, he's turning off the noise.
All right, what were the questions?
Let's see here. We have Neil asked, does the taper always refer to the degree off center line as opposed to included angle? I'm hoping James understands that.
It's not always referred to that way. A 5-degree bridge pin is 2.5 off center. Yeah, so, sometimes it's usually they'll indicate whether it's the half angle or the included.
Elaine says, I've seen people using lathe jig for copying larger spindles like table legs. Would it be possible to do that on a smaller scale? I think that's just a different kind of lathe where am I wrong about that? Like when you have like a big wood turning lathe for doing that, you've actually got the tool and you're manipulating the tool with your hand, right?
Yeah.
How those lathe jigs work?
I think you might be referring to a type of turning where you put a template below and you have a follower where you're able to follow the template and recreate that pattern in the wood. I mean, in theory, I think that would work. This is so small. I think this is a much quicker way to achieve a similar result.
And then Ethan wants to know how many you've broken doing this.
Yeah, actually none. It's a pretty robust process.
Cool.
I think I've made a lot of pins just to try and understand how to be consistent with the machining. So I get 6 pins that are the same. And there's a lot of kind of figuring out in terms of how to size everything to account for the run out in the next part that we're about to do. Because as this turns, this is not perfectly concentric. So, the pin is kind of wobbling a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So when we cut the plug, if I'm putting in an 1/8 inch bit, it's not going to cut 1/8 inch. It's going to cut 1/8 inch plus whatever run out. Plus there's the run out on the the ram from the tailstock. So to get everything sized right, took making quite a few pins. Okay, so I have put a little test cut with this the head profiler, and I still have a little meat here on the end that I'm going to take off, and it's just going to make when I glue in the plugs, it's going to make that just a little bit easier. So, oops, I protect my saw here.
Michael, you got any exotic materials you're wanting to fire up in this thing, or got anything itching to get?
No, mostly just wood at this point.
Mhm.
So, okay.
Is this making you tempted to get into turning pens at all?
Mm,
Want to make some fancy pens?
yeah, not really. I mostly just want to make bridge pins.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So this is a drill chuck, but it has the 0 Morse taper on the end, so I can put this in the tailstock. Sorry, which is just a little bit off camera. Trying to get the camera here. And I'm going to advance this ram, and then I got a little block of wood here somewhere, and I'm just going to give this a tap. I better back it up. Okay. This is just a friction fit, so I'm trying to get it, really well seated in there. Okay, and there's a couple different ways to cut the plugs. One is that you could start it with a centering drill, but I tried a couple different methods, and just using a 4-flute 1/8" bit seemed to work just fine without having to go through the extra step of doing the taper, or excuse me, doing the centering drill.
That's a really hot tip right there, everybody.
Okay.
That's a good tip. James,
So,
do you approve of this idea? I've never heard of using a 4-flute as a centering drill.
Yeah, absolutely. I approve.
yeah,
And
it's
for
really.
doing,
Sorry, go ahead, James.
it works great for doing side dots too on necks if you ever have to do that.
Yeah,
But that's a real clean cut.
this bit is short, and it's so it's really stiff,
Yeah.
and that's why it's not going to wander on the cut at all. Okay, actually, I'm going to back this up just a little bit. I just want to lock this down, and I want to make sure I can take this out without having to release the tailstock. It'll be apparent why in a second, but see how, well, I could just get it out. Okay, so that's good. All right, and then just like on the cross slide, I have a gauged hand wheel here, and I want to drill down to about 80 thousandths. It's not, the depth isn't critical. It just has to be, about the depth of the plug or less. And because I wanted to do a lot of different, use a lot of different materials potentially that would use offcuts from the guitar, I picked 80 because I have a lot of leftover side material. So this is a piece of maple, and I cut out these plugs on a CNC, You could also turn them with, like I started doing here, but ultimately it's just easier for me to write a quick program on the CNC and cut out the plugs. One thing too is that I also wanted to be able to use face grain because this is the surface that's going to be showing and that we're going to be milling away. And if this were end grain, then it would likely get pretty dirty from picking up rosewood or ebony dust from the surrounding pin. Okay, so once I hit the wood, then 2 full revolutions on the wheel will give me a depth of 80 thou.
So James, why aren't we using 4-flute bits for all of our drilling needs? It's too expensive.
No, I mean, not in that size range. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want me to try and tilt the camera? But basically, there's a hole right here that you
We
can't
can
really
imagine,
see.
but a camera tilt might not hurt.
All right, I'll try it.
I'm guessing that's an upcut bit too. Does that matter or?
I think it is an upcut bit. That's about as good as you're gonna see it
That's good.
right there.
That's illustrative.
Okay. So now, this is the part where you can't sneeze or cough
Hmm.
because I have these tiny little maple plugs. And I found the easiest way to, can I curse?
Oh yeah,
Fuck. Okay,
there
thank
you
you.
are. There you are. Nice one.
Yeah,
Went
I gotta
straight for
put,
the upper tier words too. It's deep enough in the video that that YouTube won't ding me for it though. So
right. Whoops. Okay, so I've grabbed the little plug just on the end of an X-Acto
mm-hmm.
blade here, and I'm just going to insert it in there.
Mm-hmm.
But first, I need to put a little glue on there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to use some medium viscosity CA glue.
Which version? Which variant?
This is Starbond.
Starbond.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to put a little accelerator on the plug.
Mm-hmm.
Because then in the next procedure, this gets pretty hot. So I want this to kick off really, really good and hard. Okay, so we glued the first plug in.
Those look like some
And
nice tolerances, Mike. You
no,
spend a lot of time.
there's a little maple skin on top,
Yeah.
which is part left over from the CNC machine. So
Mm-hmm.
that'll all machine off.
No, but it went in really nice. Like,
Oh,
do you spend a lot of time figuring out the plug?
I spent way too much time figuring that out
Uh-huh.
because I had to figure out right, how much run out was I getting on this consistently, but then I also had some run out on the CNC So everything was sort of had to be compensated one way or another. Okay, so now I can take this out. So there's nothing magical about this size. Um, but just to give you an idea, let's see if I can get this down here. But I tried some different sizes, and these are reject pins. But I thought I was going to like the bigger size, but they look a little too prominent on the guitar. So for me, doing an 1/8" maple ring with a 3/32 internal ring or internal plug seems to work better. Whoops, sorry about all the vibration
Oh,
there.
do your thing.
Okay. So the reason that I don't get the tailstock closer is I can take one bit out, put the next bit in, and keep the tailstock totally locked the whole time. And this is a way to, again, try and reduce any um, error because, oops, because I'm trying to keep things within a couple thousandths tolerance here. Okay, so that glue should be dry enough, and it's not really necessary, but I had sometimes if I just clean the space up a little, then as we machine out the center of this maple plug, we're leaving a really thin wall. I think it's about 12 thousandths. And so I don't want any fibers that can pull away at that wall. So I'm just going to give this a quick sand. All right, so we're ready for the next step. Okay, so now I'm ready to do a 80 thou plug.
That is some startling precision there.
Okay. Oh, you just wait, Ian.
Uh-huh.
Good stuff's coming. All right, so now we've machined out the maple, and for most of my fret markers on my guitars, I've really been liking using Pernambuco, and so I've cut these little Pernambuco plugs, same way that I cut the maple. I'll show you here.
Look at this.
Well, sorry, it's not in focus.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the first thing I do is get some glue in there. Same process.
So how is it getting your Pernambuco bridge pins out of the country with CITES?
Uh, well, suffice to say, there's just a little bit of a pucker factor,
Yeah.
and let's just leave it at that. Okay, put a little accelerator on there, and yep, lost it.
Plug fell down, Michael.
Let me grab a different plug here.
Being a wiener.
Yeah, of course. I try and do this on camera. Let's see if I can just tap that in there.
If you need to move the camera to,
There we go.
oh, there we are.
Okay.
Send it home.
All right. So let's, we do need to give that a minute to dry because the next process, when we actually cut the head, we're almost cutting end grain on the top here. And it's hard. It definitely produces a lot of heat.
Okay.
And so I don't want the plug to come loose.
Should we
And
take a minute to have a word from our sponsors, or what do you want?
yeah, sure. Sounds good.
Okay. Today's episode is brought to you by. We don't have any sponsors. We need to get sponsors.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. There's a question. Do I refresh this cutting edge? And the answer is yes. I have taken this to my sharpening stones and lapped the face. And then just recently, I lapped the underside as well to just try and sharpen the whole bit. So, and again, so it would leave a better surface finish, cut cooler. And then it's good to know that James has a program for this. So
you just
if I need,
bang out a new one.
I could get another one.
And it's really important the height of that bit. If it sits a little low or a little high, it's going to rub and produce more heat. So
Yes.
underneath that bit, there are shims that to raise it up to the proper level.
Somebody's asking the
Yeah.
tolerance on the taper. Like how I mean what's your tolerance on it? I guess he's wondering is 5.1 or 4.9. Both of those are no-goes. Does it have to be 5.001 or 5.00 or 4.009?
My in practice, I think no. I think by the time you put the pin in a slot with a string, that because I'm not, these are going to be vintage style pins. I'm not doing slotted pins. That you can get some clamping pressure just from the string itself. And I've done this in the past where I'll mark the bridge pins so that they're dedicated to a certain string. So if there's some variation in the pins, although I think within a set of six, because I set the taper once, for one set of bridge pins, they should all be the same. And then I just use a 5-degree reamer, and I just don't think that I don't know exactly what the tolerance has to be, but I don't think it's super ultra critical. James, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that's probably true in practice.
Where's your reamer from? Which reamer are you using?
StuMac.
Cool.
Yeah.
So
I think getting the large end of the taper a consistent diameter is really the critical.
Michael, before we cut that, can you square up the camera just a
oh, sure.
just a microscope?
How's that?
That's looking good.
Okay. For some reason, seems like the focus is not quite on the head of the pin. I
It's
don't know if I could get that any better.
does not have those controls.
Okay.
If we have more time, I'd show you how to monkey with the zoom. So, but I don't think it's going to be something we should mess with.
Okay. Well, this should be ready to cut, and
Okay.
then something I have been doing is before I start cutting with this, I just come in with a file and knock some of the meat off here. So this bit just has to do less work. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I'll just get right into cutting with the head. So just a few points is that you can see I'm advancing pretty slowly. This is staying really pretty cool, so that's good. When I turn the lathe on again, I'm going to come in and I'm going to give myself a white witness line so that I can tell actually when I've completely fully um, completed the cut. And then I do have a spec measurement for the diameter of the head, which is 320. So I'm going to come back in with a caliper and make sure that I'm fully at 320 right in the center there.
What kind of pen is that?
I want to make sure I'm not losing my plug here. I think we're good. I'm just going to put a file on that to sand this little nub off so there's not quite as much torque on that.
Michael, what kind of pen was that white pen?
This was a stow line, and I really like these. They're great,
Sew
and you can
line. So
get
that's sewing gear.
yes,
Cool.
and these were almost impossible to get during the time of COVID, but I think
Mhm.
you can get them pretty easy now.
Is that good for like if you're making ebony bridges and you need to mark on ebony? Is that just me or is that making me hungry for cheeseburgers? Look at this. Man, that is satisfying. James, have you messed around with fancy bridge pins before? Michael said he had an idea about fancy bridge pins.
No,
How does he approach you with a subject like that? Does he come with an idea other than he wants to make fancy bridge pins, or
well,
So I get some,
he go ahead.
oh, I all right, well, I didn't maybe I didn't have enough glue on there or when I lost the plug the first time, but the Pernambuco popped out, so that was my bad. Let me just see if I can save this pin and just drill this a little deeper and put a new plug in there. But I think it just got a little too hot for the glue.
Mhm.
All right, so now now the maple ring came out. So
Do you
um,
think you want to fill it all with epoxy putty and just move on?
yeah, well, what I was going to show you was that once you if you don't have those problems, then which I think I just didn't let the glue set long
Yeah.
enough, uh, or maybe I took too long to get that Pernambuco plug in. But this is what you end up with, and you know, I would measure the head, and you can see it's right at 320, and then this depth is also something that I want to maintain consistent, and then the width at the collar here as well, as James mentioned, that's critical. That's got to be pretty much right at 220. This one is 219. So that one's all right. So yeah, this is so Pal Ferro pin with a maple outer line that ends up being about, I think about 12 thou, and then a internal plug of, whatever you might like to put in there. So, and then just like I did with the shaft, I will take if those plugs hadn't come out, I would take some Scotch-Brite, sand that a little,
Wow, that actually put quite a burnish on that.
yeah, and then a little paste wax. And then the pin would be done. So
Dude, that's really cool.
yeah, well,
I'm
thank
sorry.
you.
I'm
Sorry
sorry you
about
felt the pressure to rush that one. Otherwise, you would have had a usable pin.
sorry about the screw up there, but
Um,
this is live TV, so
it is live, yeah. Sometimes Al Capone's vault doesn't have anything in it, you know.
yeah. So this would be the
Dude, this was awesome though. Look at that. Look at that. When how many do you do in a sitting?
well,
Your batch is like
yeah,
your batch is like 5 or 6, right?
well, 6 because of the guitars I'm building, but I'll usually cut an extra. So I'll make like 7 or 8 pins and have 2 as backups. And then because these are custom pins, it's kind of nice to deliver an extra pin or 2 with the guitar, so that the customer has a backup if they ever lose a pin.
Uh,
So
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. From Robin to everyone, that's just basically with cross slide, right?
correct.
Yes, it's a, you want to just really quickly shout out the model on your lathe there?
Oh, sure. Well, it's a Sureline 4 something.
Okay.
I know that's not very accurate, but the sticker is worn off on this, so I can't read it.
Um, boy, I feel like the next one we ought to just move right into fitting those bad Larrys. Do you think fitting them would be worth the whole episode? It feels like there's a lot of knacky stuff in there. I've fit a lot of bridge pins. I've never done it with extreme confidence. Like,
Mm.
so if you got any tricks for that, it might make a good episode.
Yeah, I've got a couple tricks. I'm not sure it's uh it could be a whole episode, but
Yeah.
we can talk about it. But usually when I first string up the guitar, I'll leave the pins kind of high, uh, just in case the bridge has absorbed some water from the hide glue and the holes have kind of swelled a little bit. And
Yeah.
then as the hide glue cures, the bridge may dry out and you might get a little bit more clearance on the holes. So it's really only when I'm doing the final uh, kind of checklist going over the guitar that I'll do the final, you know, last half twist with the reamer
Mhm.
on the bridge pins. But cutting the string ramps, uh,
Yes.
that's kind of a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
So
That would be cool if we could do that on one of them. I don't know if the next one, but I think there's a lot of meat on that bone.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, sure.
should we open it up for any post game questions, or
Sure.
anybody got anything? Feel free to. People have been throwing in the chat, so I don't know if you want to ask a question, go ahead and um, somebody's asking if there's any chance you'll make pegs for sale. Um,
I might. The only problem is I would be a little embarrassed to tell you how much I feel like I'd have to charge for them. So
yeah,
I mean, I would
Fancy bridge
imagine,
is one of those things that enter the market and then leave the market almost as quickly as they appear, right? Like some guys like,
yeah,
I'm making fancy bridge pins, and then the market goes, no, you're not.
yeah. I'd probably say if I were to make a set for somebody, probably be about $120 or
Yeah.
maybe a little more, depending on the materials. Um, there is a case where I have had bridge pins made in the past where I'll just buy a blank, say, ebony Waverly bridge pin,
Hmm.
and then um, and then that would actually just slip right into this collet, and then I could do the custom tops, and that could cut down on the cost quite a bit.
Yeah.
So
Have you done anything with like measuring these for timbre or anything like that? Have you noticed any
yeah,
difference?
that's a whole episode in and of itself.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Okay.
but no, in uh, in all seriousness, I just feel like I'm I want fairly lightweight bridge pins. I know that
Yeah.
there are brass bridge pins available, and with the idea of actually adding weight, but at least in the way that I'm working on my guitars, I'm trying to keep the weight down.
Mhm.
So uh, you know, I haven't weighed these, but they're lightweight. They're definitely less than ebony and less than
Mhm.
bone. So, but not quite as light as plastic.
Mhm. Rob and
But
Cal, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the fit of the bridge pin is probably just as critical or more critical than whether it's ebony or rosewood.
Yes. Um, I will say I I put some water buffalo horn in for a guy once, and I laughed before I did it, like
Mhm.
fancy bridge pins, and then afterwards I was like, oh, well, there was a difference. It's
Hmm.
subjective whether or not it was better or worse, but it did seem like there was a difference. But let's see. Somebody asked if cheaper lathes could get this done. Like Mike, James, any of you have any experience with like the Harbor Freight $400 mini lathe? People on the internet say those can be like, if you're willing to like really like hyper tune them up, like you can get somewhat good results out of it. This does seem like finer than what what you would think a Harbor Freight lathe would do.
I bet they would work. Um, I've heard the same things about needing some tweaking to really make them behave well. Um, but I mean, I've seen people online that do good work on those lathes.
Yeah. Jeremy says he's got a $500 one behind him. You like that thing? You think you could force it into compliance on a project like this?
Yeah, I think so. I think any good tool is kind of up to the operator and how well you can
Mm-hmm.
tune it. I have no idea what I'm doing. This is
Mm-hmm.
like my second week owning a metal lathe, but um, I feel pretty whimsical and confident with it. Um, but yeah, I was fully expecting it to be a waste of money and trash, but it seems to be pretty robust. I'm turning 3/8 brass, and I'm getting really good results. So I imagine wood is fine.
Great. Absolutely. Dan Earlywine, you got anything to say?
What?
You have anything you want to add?
Well, I come in late to this, so I'm gonna have to watch the whole thing.
Okay. Um, cool.
Someone must have made a special collet for it, right?
Yep, James Roadman did.
Yeah.
And it fits on the Sherwood.
Shoreline. Or shoreline?
Shoreline.
Shoreline.
Shoreline. Dan, which one did you send me? You sent me something that looks very similar to this. Unimat or something like that. I gotta pull that thing
Unimat.
out again. Yeah.
That'll do it.
This
Looks
is
like Michael.
this is the collet, Dan.
That's real nice.
Looks like Michael Hampel asked if I would make the collets and taper pin to sell. Yeah, if you if you find that you need one, contact me. I don't anticipate making them up in advance, but I could definitely make them if someone needed one.
Yeah, here we
I've got
go.
a quick question, if that's okay.
Yep.
So can you guys talk for a minute maybe about like cutter geometry in relation to the workpiece? Just kind of how you know what angle to attack it at and whether or not that changes with different materials or different processes?
Yeah, definitely. There are guides for different angles, for different materials. I find that I'm kind of lazy, and I just sharpen it until it cuts well, and I use it for a bunch of different materials. But there are definitely recommended geometries for all those things. I don't know them by heart. For wood, it's pretty soft compared to a lot of the things that are going to be cut. So you could do a steeper geometry and a sharper point, like I pointed out earlier.
I did touch this up on my stones and just by hand, and it's just high-speed steel, and it was really pretty easy to do. And I don't think there's anything about these clearance angles or the rake angle that makes it special for cutting in wood, but it really gives a pretty smooth finish. So I
Yeah.
was happy with it. Yeah. I think as long as we're getting in the nitty gritty of the lathes, I'll show you probably the best trick I learned, because with these, because I was really having a hard time making sure that this cutter was at the exact center of the pin. And I started putting, tin foil and various shims under there because it seemed like it was a little off. And because I wasn't really getting as much shavings as I was sort of almost like a friction type cutting. So I have a center for this part of for the head as well. So another dead center. And then what I'm going to do here is a way that you can check the alignment of your tailstock to your head and also to your cutter is by doing this little trick. So you take a razor blade or even a feeler gauge and you just advance it, and then you slip it in there. Yep, not like that. Do you see how the razor blade's straight up and down? If these two were misaligned, if, for example, if the tailstock was high, it'd be pushing the razor blade that way, or if it was low, it'd be pushing it this way. But you can see it's straight up and down, and if it's not, then you know that you have to work on the alignment. And then I was able to get the right combination of shims for the head cutter by essentially doing the same thing. And I just rotated this around so this point was matching up with this point, and I just kept putting different size shims in there until the razor blade was straight up and down, and it wasn't getting pushed over the point one way or the other. So,
oh, cool. And then that cleaned up your cutting.
Yeah, cleaned up
Very
the cutting, cool. And it saved me from having to buy a lot of expensive dial indicators and all sorts of things.
Spencer wanted to know how often you have to sharpen. How many pins do you make before you're sharpening?
Um, usually like after every 2 sets, I'll touch it up on the stones.
Okay.
So
And somebody asked, could you do slotted pins? And would it be possible to do the whole pin with one custom cutter? That I guess I don't understand.
yeah.
The slot is actually, it's not trivial to put it in, but I mean, do any of your customers ever request slotted pins? Has it come up for you at all?
No, I used to use them, and I actually had I think Stu Mack used to offer a pin slotting jig you would hook up on your drill press,
Yeah.
and that's how I would slot the pins, and I would slot the pins with different size slots to match the strings. Uh, so you could do it. I don't think you could do it on the lathe. Uh, it would have to be like a combo mill lathe to do it.
Yeah.
The other question about, could you cut this with one cutter? I mean, you could profile this whole entire pin. And I'm just not sure that, like, given my experience with how much this heats up and how much wood you're removing, if you were trying to cut this entire profile at once, uh, could work, but I'd be a little skeptical. Now, I have seen a few different methods. One method is that you have your cylinder chucked up in the lathe, and then in your tailstock, you have a uh, almost like a pencil sharpener type head, and you advance that onto the pin, and then it just cuts this taper uh, rather than the way that I've shown you here. It seems like that's a little bit of a faster way, but you do
Well, that
have the
would be
fabrication of that cutter.
it. I mean, that's basically like the violin taper cutter, right? Like,
Yeah,
except you use a
um,
lathe that.
right.
All right.
And then I'm sure that the way that Michael Gurian or Waverly makes their bridge pins is probably totally different than this, and they probably make hundreds of pins per hour. So I'm not exactly sure what kind of machinery or methodology they use.
Well, I will say, the Waverly pins that I've seen that are plastic, they're very nice. The ones that I've seen that are wood, it's been some time since I bought some, so I might be talking out of school here a little bit, but it seems like that second finer ring is often quite crumbly on other people, and those look really nice. Like that looks like very nice. Like it's not going to crumble on you the first time you try to take the bridge pin out with a
Yeah.
bridge pin popper or something. Do you make a bespoke bridge pin puller?
No, but I guess that's next. So,
I would think about it, yeah, because bridge pin
yeah,
pulling, like it's especially on the customer end, boy, those guys can't be trusted with anything. You
sure.
know, put that
But I haven't done it yet, but I'd
put
like to.
that plat. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'd say I haven't done it yet, but I'd like to start turning, end pins and strap buttons and
Mhm.
things like that.
All right. All right. All right. All right. What do you think? Call it. This has been great. This has been really good.
Well, thanks, Ian.
Unmute and tell
Thank you.
Michael that you owe him a lunch next time you see him.
I owe you lunch, you guys.
All right.
you.
All
Thank
right, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Michael.
Thank you for your
Thanks,
time.
everybody.
Thanks,
And
Michael and
James.
James.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Ian owes you a lunch. Thanks.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. All right. I see how it is. All right.